The intestines were still warm when they draped them across my throat. I was tied to a chair in the dark, in a place under the ground that smelled of mold and rot and burnt hair, and the men who had done this were laughing. Laughing like children at a birthday party. And the thing I keep coming back to, the thing that wakes me at 3 in the morning with the sheets soaked through, is that I knew, even then, that they were not going to kill me last because they had forgotten me. They were saving me. They wanted me to watch. Let me go back. Let me start where a story is supposed to start, because if I tell it out of order the way it lives in my head, you'll think I've lost my mind. Maybe I have. 20 years I wore the badge. 20 years in a town small enough that you learn the names of the drunks and the dogs both. I thought I'd seen the worst that people could do to each other. I'd scraped men off the highway and I'd stood in kitchens where the blood had gone tacky on the linoleum. I told myself I was hollowed out, that nothing could reach the bottom of me anymore. I was wrong. There was a whole room down there I never knew about, and they found it. Scene, the first call. It started with a phone call on an evening in early autumn, the kind of evening where the light goes the color of weak tea and the air smells like somebody's wood stove 3 streets over. I was near the duty room grabbing paperwork when the call came in. I heard it secondhand, the way you hear the worst news, out of the corner of your ear, before your brain agrees to take it seriously. A woman. Hysterical. Crying so hard the duty officer had to ask her 3 times to repeat the address. Her boy was gone. He'd been playing in the yard, she said, just there, just below the porch where she could see him. The light was going. She'd called him in for supper and he hadn't answered. She went down the steps and the yard was empty. She'd phoned every friend's mother, every uncle. Nobody had seen him. He had, she kept saying through the sobs, vanished like the ground had opened and swallowed him. We drove out there. And here's the first strange thing, in 20 years living in that town, I had never once been to that part of it. You think you know a place. You drive its veins every day. But there was this pocket out by the railroad tracks, near the old biofactory, that I had simply never had reason to enter. The very edge of town. A cluster of squat apartment buildings, then the rails, the ties black with old creosote, and behind them the forest standing up like a wall. A gloomy place. The kind of place where the streetlights buzz but don't seem to give off any light, where the shadows between the buildings seem deeper than they have any right to be. When we pulled up, the whole yard had gathered by the woman's building. 30 people, maybe more, standing in loose knots with flashlights, the beams crossing and uncrossing in the dusk like the antennae of some great nervous insect. We went through the entrances, knocked on every door, asked every face. And every face gave us the same answer. No. I didn't see. I didn't hear. Nothing. 30 people in a closed yard at supper time, and a child walks out of the world and not one of them hears a sound. That was the first cold finger laid against the back of my neck, though I didn't know to name it yet. Scene, the search, we called in the searchers. The men from the yard joined them, glad to have something to do with their hands, and we started combing the ground. We looked everywhere a small body could fit. Trash bins. Manholes, we pried them up and shone our lights down into the stink. Basements, the kind with dirt floors and pipes weeping rust. We found nothing. It was maybe an hour into all of this, full dark now, the cold settling in, when the dogs caught something. They'd been useless to that point, circling, confused, and then all at once one of them put its nose to the dirt by the tracks and let out a sound I didn't like. Not a bark. A kind of whine. And then they were straining at their leads, pulling the handlers across the rails and into the trees. I didn't go. Somebody had to stay with the protocols, with the car, with the mother. So I told myself. The truth is closer to this, something in me did not want to go into those trees. I'd have called it being practical, back then. Now I think some animal part of me, older than the badge, knew what was in there and shut the door on it. The mother. God, the mother. I have buried a lot of difficult hours in my life, but that woman beside me in the dark was one of the worst. She didn't stop. The crying, the questions, the way she'd grip my forearm with both hands and shake it like she could rattle a different answer out of me. Where is he? Where is my son? I ran to the all-night pharmacy and bought her sedatives, and even those barely touched her. I had to rewrite the same page of notes 4 times because her sobbing scrambled my own thoughts. I'm not proud of the irritation I felt. I want you to know that. I've paid for it since. Have you ever felt like something was watching you, not a person, but the dark itself? Tell me in the comments. Because standing in that yard with my notebook, I started to feel it. That the tree leaned behind me was a face, and the face was turned my way. Seeing the swamp, they searched all night. The dogs kept losing the trail and finding it and losing it again, leading the men in circles deeper into the woods. And toward morning, when the sky over the rails had gone the gray of dishwater, they came out at a swamp. A black, stinking swamp sitting in the middle of all those trees like a wound that wouldn't close. That's where they found him. They radioed it in and I drove out as close as the track allowed and walked the rest. I will tell you what they pulled out of that water, and then I will never describe it to anyone again as long as I live. The boy had been cut almost in half. His legs were hanging by threads. His insides were on the outside, drifting in the brown water around him, and where his insides should have been, packed up under the ribs, there was straw. Ordinary dry yellow straw. His arms and his legs had been turned the wrong way, twisted at the joints into angles a living body cannot make, and fastened in those positions with lengths of rusted wire, wound tight. 2 of the searchers were sick into the reeds. One man, a big man who drove a delivery truck for a living, simply sat down in the mud and stopped responding, and we had to walk him out by the elbows. A scarecrow. That's the word that came to me and I hated it the moment it arrived, because it fit. They had made the boy into a scarecrow. I carried that back to the mother. I told her plainly, because she deserved plainness, and it cost me more than I can put into words. But here is the thing that has never sat right with me. She didn't break. She didn't tear at her hair the way she had when there was still hope. She just took 2 fistfuls of my jacket, leaned her forehead against my chest, and cried very quietly, like a woman crying at the end of a long illness she'd seen coming for months. As if she had already known. As if the not knowing had been the only part she was fighting. We opened the case. We started looking for whoever could do that to a child. And the next day, when I went back to her apartment to clarify a detail, the front door stood unlocked. That's how I got in. I found her in the bathroom. She'd opened her wrists in the tub. The place was poor, threadbare, almost bare, and with the boy gone there had been nothing left in it to hold her here. The case went onto the shelf. No leads. No witnesses, in a yard full of witnesses. It sat there gathering dust until the day it stood up and started walking again. Scene, it happens again, the call came in the middle of the night. A child missing. Playing on the street, then gone, vanished, the parents said, as if through the ground. And the address was the same dismal corner of town. Same rails, same factory, same forest standing watch. I drove out and it was like stepping into a recurring dream. The same buildings. Some of the same men with the same flashlights. We went to the same swamp. But this time the water gave up nothing. Not that night. Not the next day. Not in the week that followed, a week during which another child went missing. A girl, 12 years old, who walked to the store and never walked home. And this one took her in broad daylight. Though I'll tell you, in that part of town, daylight didn't mean much. You could stand on those streets at noon and not see a single living soul. The whole district had a held-breath quality to it, a stillness like a stage after the audience has left. So a girl disappearing under the sun didn't surprise me the way it should have. That's how wrong the place was. It had rewritten my sense of what was normal. The dogs were no use now. Whatever they'd managed that first night, they couldn't manage anymore. You'd push a piece of the child's clothing under their noses and they'd whine, flatten their ears, and press themselves against your legs like they wanted to crawl inside you to hide. Animals know things. I've come to believe that completely. The dogs knew what was in those woods and they wanted no part of it. The town caught fire with rumor. People stopped going out after dark, and then they stopped letting their children out at all without an adult gripping each small hand. You'd see it everywhere, mothers walking kids to school in tight, watchful clusters, eyes going to every parked car, every alley mouth. 3 gone now. And privately I believed all 3 were already on the far side of it, already drifting in some black water with straw under their ribs. But hope dies last, they say. The parents waited. They hoped. I let them. Seen, the first lead, then there was a 4th. Another girl, a little farther from that cursed street. And this time, finally, a thread to pull. When we worked the scene, we found the last person to have seen her, her friend, another girl of about 10 or 11. And what this child told us turned the whole case on its hinges. Her friend, she said, had been messaging someone online for a few days. A friend. Someone who had promised her a new phone. The man hadn't said where they'd meet, the girl had gone off to find out, but here, at last, was a shape in the fog. Not a ghost. Not the ground opening. A man. A man with a phone and a kind voice and a gift to give. A man who knew exactly which thread to pull, because a child of 10 has all the appetite of an adult and none of the suspicion. Within a day we'd built our own accounts. A handful of them, scattered across every platform a kid might use, each one playing a lonely child hungry for something. And we waited, the way you wait at a hole in the ice. 2 days later, one of them bit. Seen, the bait, he came to an account my partner was running. I'll call him Dale Brooks, that wasn't his name, but I owe his real name the dignity of leaving it out of this. The contact opened with, "Hi, let's get to know each other." Brooks wrote back clumsily, on purpose, dropping letters and fumbling words the way a real kid would, so the man wouldn't smell the cop in it. He never gave a name. He talked about video games. How much he loved them. How he had a spare gaming console, a whole console, brand new, just lying around with nobody to use it, and how he'd been thinking, in his great kindness, about who he might give it to. Half an hour of this and the trap closed, a meeting, near the railroad crossing by the bio factory. Of course. The same ground, just a little nearer the trees. Brooks played the eager, trusting child to perfection. Asked no awkward questions. Agreed to everything. It was getting on toward evening when the next message landed. I'm taking the console and heading to the spot, with a little smiling face after it. Then a photo of a beautiful boxed console, white and clean and gleaming. Brooks wrote back that he had to ask his mom, since it was getting late. And while he asked his mom, we grabbed our vests and our weapons and went. I want to tell you what I was thinking in the car, because it shames me. I was thinking it would be easy. We'd roll up, put this sick coward on the ground, cuff him, and figure out the rest at the station over coffee. I actually felt good. I felt like we were finally going to win one. If you're enjoying this, if this story is keeping you up, subscribe, because we post new horror every single night, and I promise you the ones that haunt me most are the ones that started out feeling easy. Scene, the chase, we parked well back and went the rest on foot. The rails. A low brick railroad building beside them, windows long gone to black. And there he was. Standing by the building with the white box in his hands, turning his head, watching the dark. We got as close as the shadows allowed. Then I came up out of them and shouted it the way you're trained, police. Hands behind your head. On the ground. He ran. Instantly, with no hesitation at all, like he'd been waiting for exactly that word. Into the trees. He was gone into the dark so fast it was unnatural, but he didn't drop the box. He carried that white console into the forest like it mattered more than his freedom, and that white box bobbing in the blackness was the only thing that let us follow. To this day I don't understand why he kept it. Unless it wasn't really a console at all. Unless it was something else, something he could not leave behind. We went in after him. Branches tearing at the vests, roots grabbing the ankles. He moved through that forest like he'd been born in it, like he knew every trunk and ditch by feel. I could hear myself going from pursuer to prey in my own head. That's his ground, not yours, and I drew my weapon and fired. So did the others. 4 of us shooting and that thing just kept running, the white box never wavering. I don't know if he was charmed or if we were simply terrified men shooting badly into the dark. The bullets went nowhere. Then, a splash. A cry. I turned and Brooks was gone, into the swamp. The same swamp. The same black water that had given back the first boy. I shouted for one of the men to stay and pull him out, and the last of us pressed on, the 2 of us, lights jerking through the trees. And then the man beside me stopped dead. In the beam of my flashlight, 3 figures were stepping out of the trees toward us. One was huge, built like an ox, shoulders blotting out the dark behind him. The other 2 were thin, overgrown, filthy, the way men get when they've lived underground a long time, skin gone gray with coal dust dark. And the one we'd been chasing came jogging up out of the brush and took his place among them, easy as a man coming home. One held a burning torch. One held a kerosene lamp, the flame guttering. And every single one of them was armed. A sickle. An axe. A long knife. They stopped maybe 10 meters off and just stood there, looking at us, the firelight crawling up their faces. And I will be honest with you, because I'm done lying about it, I was more frightened in that moment than I have ever been in my life. A grown man, 20 years a cop, and something in me simply collapsed. My hand wouldn't bring the pistol up. I heard my partner's shot crack out beside me, heard one of those things let out a long animal howl, and then they came at him all at once, a pile of bodies in the firelight, and they knocked the gun out of his hands like he was a child. I started forward. I got the pistol half raised. Then the back of my head came apart. White light, then a branch spinning away in front of me, then the cold ground rising up to meet my face. I didn't black out. Not then. The pain was so enormous that my body simply stopped taking orders. I lay there twitching while they ran to me and bound my wrists and ankles with wire, winding it tight, and I couldn't make out a word they said to each other. I tried to kick. A second blow came down. And then, mercifully, nothing. Scene, underground, I came back to cold water trickling onto my face. A thin little stream of it, almost gentle, almost playful, and that was the worst part, the playfulness of it. Like they were waking a guest. My vision was doubled. My skull felt split down the middle. I tried my hands and feet and they were dead, gone numb, the wire so tight it had stopped the blood. Slowly the world resolved. The first thing I saw was the two thin ones, sitting at a rough table, playing cards. Playing cards. As if it were any night, anywhere. The smell told me where I was before my eyes could. Damp. Mold. The sour reek of unwashed bodies that have nowhere to wash. Some abandoned place, a cellar, or a stretch of old catacombs under the factory, the walls running with moisture. Brooks lay beside me, bound the same as I was, just coming around, his eyes rolling toward me. He was alive. They'd pulled him out of the swamp only to bring him here. One of the thin men noticed us stirring. He came over, crouched, grinned with a mouthful of rotten teeth. "They're awake," he called back to his friend. I started talking, fast, low, the way you talk a jumper off a ledge. "We're police. There are dozens more coming. Free us now and it goes easier for you." They laughed. One of them kicked me in the stomach, casually, the way you'd nudge a dog out of a doorway. I carried that bruise for weeks. I don't know who they were. Madmen. A family. A cult of some kind that had grown down there in the dark like something under a rock. But it was what I saw next that took the last of my legs out from under me, that I will carry into whatever comes after this life. They took Brooks first. They were angry at him, he'd wounded one of theirs back in the woods, and they wanted it paid. They sat him in a chair. And they made me watch. I understood, dimly, that this was the point of keeping me alive a little longer. One of the thin ones came and put his face right against my ear, his breath like meat left in the sun, and whispered, "Now you will die many, many times." What would you have done? I have asked myself that question 10,000 times. Tied with wire, half blind, watching a friend in a chair. I still don't have an answer. I still wonder, to this day. The ox of a man picked up a gas torch, a welding torch, the kind that roars when you open it up, and he opened it all the way and put the flame to Brooks's head. The hair went up at once. The room filled with smoke and a smell I cannot describe and will not try to. Brooks screamed, a sound that has no business coming out of a human throat, and it broke against the concrete walls and came back doubled. One of the thin men held my eyelids open with his fingers so I couldn't look away, couldn't even blink. And when the smoke thinned I saw what waits behind my eyes every single night, skin and hair melted together and sliding off the bone, the white of the skull showing through. And he was still alive. I could see his chest moving. Then the ox took the long knife and drew it across Brooks's throat, almost kindly, and the screaming stopped, and the blood went across the floor in a black sheet in the lamplight. His part was short. Mine, I understood, was going to be long. Scene, the harvest, they dragged Brooks into a corner and put me in the chair. And when they brought the kerosene lamp close, I finally saw the whole of the room. The children were there. The ones whose photographs sobbing parents had pressed into my hands. They had not buried them. They had kept them. Posed them. The girl who'd gone for the phone stood upright in the corner, bent backward into a bridge, her spine arched the wrong way and held there with wires so the shape would never relax. The first boy stood with his arms and his legs reversed at the joints. Their bellies had been opened and emptied and packed with straw, though not emptied all the way, because the bodies had begun to turn, and in the lamplight I could see their eyes had gone soft and pale, crawling with the white of fly larvae. They had made dolls of them. Effigies. Scarecrows to stand in a field that grew nothing but more children. Why? I got the word out around the terror. Why children? The thin one tipped his head back, toward the dripping ceiling, toward whatever he imagined was above it. Because he likes it, he said. For my lord. And there it was, the rot under the rot. Not madness alone. Faith. The most patient and bottomless thing there is. The straw, I said. Why the straw? It's a scarecrow. He ran the edge of the knife along the shell of my ear, lightly, almost tender. So the harvest is good. So the weather doesn't spoil. Farmers. They thought they were farmers, and the children were seed. But why children? I was screaming it now. Why them? Because they are weak, said the other one, behind me. And stupid. And he forced a filthy rag into my mouth so I'd stop. Then they crossed to Brooks's body in the corner. They opened his stomach and they reached in with their bare hands and pulled, and they carried it back to me dripping, and they hung it across my neck and shoulders. I sat there with my dead friend's insides on me and my mind simply walked out of the room. Whatever a man is, the part of me that was that man left for a while, and what stayed in the chair was only a body that wept and shook. Seen, the door, there had been 4 of them in the woods. But only the ox and one thin man were in the room with me now. I have never learned where the other 2 went. Whether they were out hunting. Whether they had simply walked off into the dark to begin again somewhere else. And that gap, those 2 missing men, is exactly the size of the thing that still keeps me from sleeping. But it saved me. Because while they worked, my men found us. They dragged Brooks's would-be rescuer out of the swamp and gone looking, and they had followed the only thing that travels clean through a forest at night. The scream. Brooks's scream, when the torch was on him, it had carried, the way sound carries over still cold water, and they had walked straight toward the worst sound any of them had ever heard because that's the job, that's what the badge is supposed to mean. The door burst in. One of the thin men opened it to see and was shot where he stood. The ox turned and took the next round. And then my men, seeing the room, seeing the children on their wires, seeing me in the chair with what was around my neck, emptied their weapons into those 2 until the slides locked back. I was found sitting in a chair with my trousers pulled down around my ankles, sobbing, cradling my friend's intestines like something I was trying to keep warm. I don't remember the rest with any order to it. SWAT came. An ambulance came. Hands cut the wire off my wrists and the blood came roaring back into them and I screamed again, for a different reason. I turned in my badge not long after. I couldn't put it back on. Every time I reached for it I smelled burning hair. Seen, after, those other 2 were never found. No one knows where they went. Maybe to another town, another row of buildings at the edge of another forest, to find more children who are weak and stupid and trusting, and turn them into scarecrows for a harvest that never comes. I think about it more than I should. What if the scream hadn't carried? What if the swamp had been a little farther from the door, the night a little louder, the men a little slower? I wouldn't be telling you any of this. I'd be standing in that cellar still, posed in the corner with my arms turned the wrong way, my belly full of straw, my eyes gone soft and white, waiting for a harvest under a Lord who likes the taste of children. I owe my life to 4 men who walked toward the worst sound in the world instead of away from it. I'll be in their debt until the day I die. And some nights, in that long gray hour before dawn, I lie awake and I listen to the dark of my own house, and I find myself straining for it, that splash, that whisper, that roar of an opening torch. Listening for the 2 who got away. Because I never heard them leave. I only ever heard them arrive. Subscribe for more horror every single night. And if you want more stories that will keep you up, check out What the Wow Stories for the wildest relationship drama you've ever heard. Link below. Sleep well.